Hello everybody, this is Havoc with my first deep foray into SFO Grimhammer II for Warhammer 2. After several hundred hours of modding by Venrus and the SFO team, they are very pleased to announce their most impactful update to date, dubbed Enough for Everyone. This update contains a massive amount of sweeping changes to the mod itself, mostly aimed at quality of life changes and general improvements to the core of the mod. There are also a lot of full support updates to new DLC factions, units, and mechanics. As with all of SFO Grimhammer updates, this one contains a ton of information. Before this video specifically, I'll go over the most important changes. A link to the full changelog will be available in the description of this video for those that like to get into the thick of the changes. Lastly, before we begin, this video is sponsored by SFO Grimhammer II. A huge thanks for supporting this channel. If you'd like to support SFO Grimhammer II the mod itself, check out their Patreon link in the video description. Deep breath, let's dive in. Quality of life changes. These changes are few in number but have a very solid impact on your campaigns. First is improved unit tooltips. Noted by the green text on the unit's card, these unit tooltips now contain more accurate information about the unit in question, including unit roles, hidden stats, and more important details. This improvement caters more towards new players to the SFO mod, but can still be useful to all players as well. Next up is accurate spell stats. In an effort to help players new and old with more transparency, new UI changes have been added so that all spells now show their actual damage values, ammunition replenishment values, magic regen, and healing values. And lastly, in the quality of life area, banner carriers. Using custom models by modders Chaos Roby and textures by HN, every faction will now have a bannerman leading their infantry regiments into battle. Banner carriers will be released as a standalone vanilla mod. Battle changes. There are 4 main battle changes in the SFO update, and they will play a pretty significant role in changing up battles for Warhammer 2. One of the biggest reworks is on leadership. The SFO team wanted to find a way to make battles last longer and for players to be able to control their unit's leadership more effectively. As such, leadership debuffs from factors such as flanking and fear have been debuffed themselves to try and reduce the shock gameplay from vanilla. Conversely, leadership fallout from unit casualties have been made much more severe. The end result is that a unit's morale is more tied to its HP level, less so by outside factors. And what you end up seeing is units at full HP much harder to rout, while lower HP units will be much easier to rout. This leadership rework ties directly into the next battle change with HP pool increases. With leadership tied so tightly to HP, the amount of HP per unit has been increased across the board by an average of 10 to 20%. This increase will allow a more natural evolution for longer battle times and also to combat certain spells and abilities that the team felt were just overperforming in SFO. One of the bigger changes to battles is single entity balancing. The big issue with single entities is that they do not lose combat performance until they are dead, unlike multi-model units that lose performance as they lose models. This made single entities a bit too powerful. The team tackled this by introducing a minus 10% vigor debuff to the unit when their HP dropped below 50%, meaning to tire the entity out much more quickly. As this is the first attempt to balancing single entities, more debuffs or other single entity reworks will be added to future updates. Lastly on the battle changes is a ranged weapon tweak. Ranged units across the board will see an ammunition adjustment, in many cases increasing it. The team has also tweaked accuracy values depending on the unit type, which to me makes some pretty solid sense. And for those units using anti-large weapons, there has been a 25 to 50% increase buff to the bonus versus large value. When it comes to campaign gameplay in Warhammer 2, I personally feel that anything that can create depth is a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. And the SFO Grimhammer II update has some very welcome ones indeed. Imperium Power is the first on the list. Made with modder Drunk Flamingo, this Imperium Power system creates a much smoother progression to empire building that is directly tied to how many settlements that you own. In the early game, your life is much easier as the first Imperial level gives you boosts to faction-wide public order and recruitment cost reduction. On the second level, these boosts are halved. Once you get more than 6 settlements, the debuffs begin and life gets tricky. You'll start to see an increase in unit upkeep, building costs, and a decrease to public order that slowly increases with every settlement you take. To help combat these debuffs and tackle the difficulties of managing a large empire, players will receive bonuses to campaign movement range and growth throughout the empire alongside the debuffs. Imperium Power will be released as a standalone vanilla mod. In tandem with the new Imperium Power is a rework for supply lines. Creating additional armies will no longer cripple your income. Instead, each new army only increases upkeep by 1%, while increasing recruitment costs by 10%. This makes it viable to have multiple armies at a very early stage in your campaign and still be able to maintain those armies as your Imperium level increases and as you add more armies in the future. Both the Imperium Power and supply rework will make it much harder to progress in the late game though, as buildings will become increasingly costly to build and losses from battles will be harder felt since recruitment will become ever more expensive. Supply lines will also be released as a standalone vanilla mod. The next big campaign change is on settlement growth, and in an effort to combat snowballing, growth has seen some pretty serious reworks. Main settlement chains have been adjusted to provide less growth, with growth increases now moved to specialized buildings depending on the faction. Additionally, it now costs 1 more population surplus to upgrade main settlements. These changes have 2 consequences. First, if you want to grow your provinces, you will need to make room for those specialized growth buildings. Just using your main settlement will not do the job anymore. Second, the mid-game is now extended as you can no longer rush straight to in-game units in tier 4 and 5 cities. The next 2 are both tied to skills, with red skill nerfs to be had across the board, mostly centered around infantry and ranged infantry skills. The team felt that infantry unit stats were able to be buffed a bit too crazily, so these small nerfs are an attempt to settle that down a bit. And when it comes to hero skills, Venrus himself has made over 350 new skills for every single hero in the game. These new skills will allow every hero to branch out in a different way than before, other than just into combat. Lastly, among the campaign changes is no more player prioritization. The team has removed the AI's vendetta to see human players exterminating while disregarding all other factions. To the AI, you'll just be treated like everyone else. Moving on to the latest DLC factions, we'll start with the new greenskin changes. Since the boys love fighting, the greenskins now get some positive public order effects from rebellions. The SFO team didn't want greenskin players to be too overly concerned about public order to be slightly more lore friendly, letting players just focus on fighting and stabbing. There are some of Grom's cooking effects that felt just a bit overtuned, so several of these effects have been nerfed to various degrees. Down to the legendary lords themselves, Grimgor gets a dilemma every 5 levels he gains. These dilemmas give him a choice of 4 faction-wide buffs to use during his campaign. Skarsnik gets new campaign unique skills that are only available to him if he is your faction leader, and even bigger buffs once he captures Carrick 8 Peaks. Warzog has a new unit available only to him, the Savage Rogue Idol. The Rogue Idol starts off small, but can grow larger and more powerful through Warzag's skill tree. And finally, Adzag in with a pretty cool ability. He now gains access to zombies and Terrorgeist units. Additionally, he can recruit a single zombie dragon. These units benefit from green screen unit sets, but are only available in the campaign, not in multiplayer. The High Elves are not as shifted up as the Greenskins, but there are some changes nonetheless. One of the biggest for me personally is a change to the Warden's Cage. This ability now lasts for the entire battle instead of temporarily, and lowers the enemy's movement speed by 25%. However, it also makes them unbreakable, so kill them quickly. The Batcave, Athel Tamara, has seen effects to all of the Athel Tamara upgrades. The SFO team felt the mechanic was lacking in the vanilla compared to Grom's mechanics. If you're looking for a challenge as Imric, his dragon battles have been made much harder. If that's what you're into, then good for you, but that ain't me. And his dragons also are much more unique than in vanilla. The Mistwalker units have had their looks and roles changed across the board. They should all feel and look distinct from the rest of the High Elf roster. To wrap this section up, the final Eltharion battle has seen some big changes to it. Much like Imric's dragon battles, it should be quite the challenge. Don't think that the team hasn't been working on other factions in this update. For starters, the Skaven get 2 unique non-DLC related units. Clan Rictus gets a tier 4 unit called Rictus Stormvermin. These unique units have more models than their original counterparts, quite the deadly upgrade. Queek gets access to a new legendary unit, his infamous Redguard, buffs to rewards on owning Carrick 8-peats, and gives him new skills based on his trophy heads. The Tomb King sees some love in the form of access to an extra army from turn 1. This is to help them cope with the increased growth and building costs seen in the update. With Imperial Authority effects, at low Imperial Authority you gain bonuses for fighting against the Empire. This should create some interesting campaigns. In an effort to make Beastmen and Chaos campaigns less brutal in the early game, there have been changes to upkeep debuffs on technologies and an increase in starting gold. Go buy yourself something nice with it. The Wood Elves see a Confederation change, lowering the construction time and cost on the first 3 levels of the Oak of Ages to each take 10 turns and cost 10,000 gold. This should make it easier to confederate Athelorn early on. For the Dwarves, Engineers have received a new gyrocopter mount and other more secretive Dawi features that you can find only in the changelog. Lastly in this feature video are buffs on all levels of the Geomantic Web. At max level, the Geomantic Web will buff Alslan faction wide. We are finally through all the major update features the SFO team wanted pushed out for this video. There are of course tons more to this update than what I featured, so do yourself a favor, grab a snack and open up the changelog. You'll be there for quite a while. I want to thank Venrus and the SFO team for allowing me to cover this update. It was a blast playing around and I'm excited to dig into some campaigns for it. If you hadn't played SFO before like myself, this is honestly the update you've been waiting for, with lots of things catered to new players, so hop over to the Steam Workshop page and subscribe. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. This is Havoc, and I'll see you all in the next video.